and international climate research community to encourage sharing and making climate change research effective. We are pleased to share that Islamic Relief Bangladesh, as a dedicated practitioner of locally led adaptation, LLA, today hosting a special session at the 5th Gobeshona Global Conference. Today's session theme is Community Managed Climate Finance Enhancing Women-Led Adaptation Lessons from Bangladesh. The session will explore how community managed finance mechanisms are enabling women to lead climate adaptation efforts at the grassroots level. It presents a practical, inclusive, locally led adaptation approach and advocates for its integration into national and global policy framework. Today, we have three distinguished personnel from reputed international humanitarian and development organization who has more than decade experience on climate change and specifically on locally led adaptation. With us, we have Mr. Talha Jamal, Country Director, Islamic Relief Bangladesh, and Jamie Williams, Senior Policy Advisor, International Program Division, Program Quality Department, Islamic Relief Worldwide, as our honorable panel discussants. Also, I would like to introduce Anwar Hussain, Deputy Program Manager, Islamic Relief Bangladesh, who will be our keynote presenter for today's session. He will present on community managed climate finance, enhancing women-led adaptation lessons from Bangladesh. As a part of starting the proceedings, I would like to invite Anwar Hussain to share his presentation.
Thank you, Sister Sravani. Dear audience, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum. You are welcome to our today's presentation, Community Managed Climate Finance Enhancing Adaptation. Lesson from Bangladesh. Yes. Sorry. Okay. Thank you. You know that Bangladesh is one of the most climate vulnerable countries. Every year, we are facing different type of climate-induced hazards. And we have to suffer a lot, as well as we have to lose economic losses. Bangladesh has incurred 3.72 billion in economic losses in the last 20 years. In case of severe flooding, GDP falls by as much as 9%. We are facing severely in scarcity of drinking water. Only 59.11% people of Bangladesh has access to safe drinking water. Due to the climate change, our houses are affected due to river erosion, soil salinity, and landslide. Climate change will hit poor and vulnerable people. The hardest tropical cyclone cost Bangladesh average $1 billion per year. Due to climate change, the soil has lost its bonding properties. As a result, the coastal community are facing difficulties to sustain their traditional mud-based houses. And in the river area, due to the river erosion, the poor people have to shift their houses frequently. That is a burden, economical burden for them. In the western part and in our hilly area, due to the heavy rain, flash flood, and soil erosion, landslide is common phenomenon in this area, and the poor people are suffering much. The sexual and reproductive health and rights of women are progressively worsened during and post climate change related events. Due to use of saline water, the women are facing different type of diseases, skin diseases, their genital diseases, and reproductive health is challenging. Increasing the risk of early marriage, sexual violence, and divorce also. In 2024, approximately 33 million children in Bangladesh experienced interruption in schooling due to climate-related events, such as heat waves, cyclones, and floods. Ultimately, it increasing the risk of school dropout and early marriage. Flood, drought, heat wave, and salinity affecting our agricultural production, resulting food insecurity, challenge of health and nutrition. IPC study 2024 said that 96% population are in acute food security in Bangladesh. Over 1.6 million people are in emergency phase. We see the climate vulnerable, the people of the climate vulnerable communities are moving to the cities for job. They are migrating. Day by day, this migration, climate forced migration is increasing. And it is one type of modern slavery. These young people, the youths are bounded to the brick field and lead the miserly life here. World Bank says by 2050, agriculture GDP could be lost by 13 million, and 13 million people would be climate-induced migrants. Islamic Relief Bangladesh recently conducted a study. Over 3,000 people who has 3,000 household who has monthly income less than 10,000 taka. This study was conducted in the southwestern coastal part of Bangladesh. This study showed that the most of the people, these poor people, expense their regular income in food purchases, their house repairing, loan installment, and medical care. They have very little scope to invest in asset purchases, participation in the social events, buying clothes, and children's education purpose. But these people are facing different type of difficulties when the climate-induced hazard comes. They have no resources to cope with it. As a result, most of the household follow the negative coping strategy. As a coping strategy, they first prefer degradation of food quality, and taking reduction of food intake, number of meal. Then they sell productive asset. Borrowing money from the different microfinance institute or high interest loan from the community people or the money lender. This coping mechanism bounding them more poverty cycle. But we say that climate finance, we are talking about the global level, must about the climate finance. But adaptation financing is very much ignored. Bangladesh is very less contributor in the climate change issues, but suffers more. We have no alternatives but adaptation. But in the global scenario, we say that there is a huge gap in climate financing and adaptation need versus actual fund flow. 2024 to 2030 has been projected that it will be required $212 billion US, and 2031 to 2050, it will be required $239 billion. But our flows are very little comparing to this need. In the Bangladesh context, we see that adaptation, as per National Adaptation Plan, we need 8.5 billion US dollar for mitigation purpose. As according to NDC, we need 17.6 billion US dollar. According to Delta Plan, we need 3.17 billion US dollar. Actually, average climate finance need without development project, $26.12 billion. That means 5.8% of total GDP. But our sources of flow, the fund is very limited. Average climate finance utilized last up to 2018 to 2022, $2.76 billion. That means 0.63% of the national GDP. It means that there is a huge gap. It has been found that in this little amount of the fund flow, of this fund, 60% global finance went to revenue generating sectors like energy, transport, and infrastructure, and are mostly in mitigation purposes. So here is adaptation is not considered enough. Adaptation financing is ignored here. Between 2022 to 21 and 24, the majority of climate finance in Bangladesh was directed to three major areas. One, food security, social protection, and health. Second, infrastructure. Third, mitigation and low carbon development. Interesting thing that climate finance has been used for social protection. Here is the scenario. What the social protection finance goes. A part of climate finance, 2.2% of national GDP goes to social protection. Deposit includes non-traditional social safety net items like pension and interest payment, comprising 59% of the total allocation and leaving only 41% for vulnerable citizens. This 41% budget uses for only population 34% in key programs like VGT, VGF, old age allowance, food for work, a significant portion of vulnerable individuals are remain excluded. Here is also adaptation, household adaptation need of the most vulnerable poor people has been ignored. In rural Bangladesh, women are mostly responsible for collecting water, collecting cooking fuel, maintaining sanitation and hygiene for her family, ensuring food and nutrition of all categories of members of her houses. Old, elderly person, children, young person. So all categories of the household members depends on the women for their nutrition and the health betterment. But women has little access, actually no access to the resources to adapt with the changed situation. Women has to take burden to collect the drinking water from far from houses. It takes sometimes half an hour to walk to collect the drinking water. As in the coastal area, there is no agricultural activities and vegetation. The women, the poor women would not collect the fuel, cooking fuel from the nature. As a result, they have to cook once in a day. And it is very difficult for them to collect the cooking fuel. Sanitation is another challenge for the women. As the saline water, in the waterlogging situation, there is contaminated water. So every day the women, children, and the adolescent girls are facing the hygiene issues. According to ICCCAD, only 10% of current climate finance reaches the most vulnerable communities. That indicate poor access to the climate finance. Now, it is a big challenge for our community, for our poor people. To overcome this challenge, Islamic Relief Bangladesh has introduced a innovative approach that enhancing capacity of the women to access the resources for adaptation and to reduce their pain. How this process is working, how we can hear a voice from the community people.
Anwar bhai, we cannot hear the sound.
Now, this story says us the poor people has many type of burden, but they have dignity. They are bounded with the interest-based microfinance, and they are talking about it was their prestigious issue when the people ask the money before others. So in the Islamic faith perspective, we all are the human dignity. In this, how now I will tell you how the process works, how it was achieved. At first, we identify the most vulnerable people and engaging them into the self-help group. Then enabling the households and communities to prioritize their adaptation needs. Then mobilizing and channelizing of community-managed climate funds. Then these groups are linked with the service providers, private sectors for its sustainability. The poor people, the poor households are mobilized into the self-help group. These households starts small amount savings from their regular income and mobilized emergency fund. From this emergency fund, they can borrow money in their during their emergency need without any interest and with flexible time. The household, the group members can use this money to meet their emergency needs. For example, medical expenses or tuition fees for the schooling, food purchase, and different type of emergency funds, emergency purposes they can take. It is a small loan, 2,000 to 3,000 taka. They can take easily, borrow from their group savings. And another savings, Islamic Relief gave grant to the individual households. The households invested this money according to their adaptation business plan. From the income of this business, they start savings a small amount in their group fund and mobilize adaptation fund. From this adaptation fund, they can take loan without interest and with flexible time, 10,000 to 15,000 taka for the expansion of their business or to buy the rainwater harvesting system, that establishing the latrine, sanitary latrine, and different type of adaptation purposes they can. These self-help groups are organized under the umbrella of a apex body for its sustainability objective. Apex body plays the vital role for look after these self-help groups. This apex body also mobilize the fund by selling share to the self-help group members, collecting the annual insurance, Islamic micro insurance premium, collecting the donation from the different organization and government also. Using this fund, they usually do the social business. And profit share they distribute to the self-help group members annually. This apex body also operated small climate insurance. In Islamic terms, we call it Takaful Fund, Islamic micro insurance. It helps the people to transfer their risk. By this time, this apex body paid a number of insurance claimer. They follow a by law what purpose and which incident can claim the Takaful Fund. And following these bylaws, this apex body continue their Islamic microfinance activities. This apex body also connect these self-help group members, vulnerable communities, to the government services, private sectors, and their health rights and their human rights activists who are working. So this model is now working, and it is giving the confidence and solving the problem of the climate vulnerable poor people, as we have seen in the video clip. Our learning from this IRB community managed climate financing model. It showcases interest-free emergency loans and adaptation funds that reducing women's dependence on exploitative financial systems. Women collectively decide on fund allocation, reinforcing leadership, and challenging traditional gender roles. The model ensures that adaptation finance reaches those who need it most, reducing inequality in climate response. By placing decision-making power in the hands of community members, this approach aligns with the principles of just adaptation. It offers an alternative to exploitative microfinance, promoting financial justice for vulnerable populations. The model highlights how self-help groups empower women to manage climate finance, lead adaptation efforts, and gain financial independence. Social business following Sharia compliance, enhancing their economical growth, and Islamic microinsurance giving strength through risk transfer. What is the implication of this model? This model is, we can consider a vehicle of grounding climate finance in a sustainable manner to build resilient community through locally led adaptation practices. This is absent in our national strategy or global strategy. We are talking much about the climate change adaptation finance, but still now there is no clear mechanism set how the climate finance will reach to the most vulnerable people. So this model could be a good example how the climate finance can go, adaptation finance can go to the most vulnerable people in the effective way and sustainable way. It might be a practical example of social business and other theories related to climate resilience at different scale. This model will contribute to achieve a number of SDG goals, we hope. Or we have some recommendations here. At first, as it is a new approach, so we should advocate for the formal inclusion of community managed finance mechanism as a core component of locally led adaptation strategies. It should be encouraged collaboration among local communities, government agencies, NGOs, and donors to strengthen support for self-help group-based adaptation financing. We should mobilize sustainable financial resources and explore opportunities to scale self-help group-led adaptation funds across vulnerable regions. We should push for global climate finance mechanisms to allocate direct grants to grassroots communities, enabling timely and context-specific adaptation actions. We have seen that global climate finance mostly comes through the debt mechanism, but our demand, it must be as grand as a poor country and the most vulnerable country and the most affected country. We must demand the climate adaptation fund must be as grant, not in debt or any kind of development budget. We should develop and implement robust frameworks to track and evaluate the effectiveness of adaptation finance at the community level. We should ensure guarantee inclusive financial access for marginalized and climate vulnerable groups, ensuring adaptation efforts are both just and equitable. Thanks everybody for hearing me. Thank you everybody. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you, Anwar Hussain, for your insightful presentation. Now I would like to invite Jamie William, Senior Policy Advisor, International Program Division, Program Quality Department, Islamic Relief Worldwide, to discuss on Islamic Relief's broader work in adaptation, promoting particularly adapting for the future. Jamie?
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you very much, Sister Romana. Thank you so much. ICCCAD and the organizers of Gobeshona for this opportunity. And thank you, Anwar, for that stunning presentation. I'm so impressed really with what Islamic Relief Bangladesh has been doing over the years. I think that this presentation indicates that we have a clear understanding, as Anwar pointed out, the impacts of climate-related events on Bangladesh. He outlined the challenges that the Bangladesh government faces in ensuring the inclusion of all in social safety nets. He outlined the limitation of women's situation and how the women's unique vulnerability to climate needs to be considered alongside the central role that women have in building resilience and adaptive capacity at the local level, but of course beyond to the national level. I think the core of what Anna has been telling us is that what IRB, Islamic Relief Bangladesh, have been doing, and especially important is this model for grounding climate finance, which presents what Islamic Relief Bangladesh have been doing now for, I would think it's not really 15 years. I think 15 years since climate was particularly mentioned as part of the process that Anwar was describing. But actually, I think the methodology really relates back to 1995. So we're now talking about more like 30 years. And during that, and 30 years ago, the issue was headlined as poverty reduction. But we're talking about 30 years of developing and testing the model. And this is an exemplary example of learning and applying the learning. And the result is a model which is one of the most sophisticated and efficient for building climate resilience. And it's working. It's a model, as Anwar was suggesting, it's a model not just for Islamic Relief's work, not just for passing on to government in Bangladesh, but it's a global model. It's a global strategy. It has relevance and application in every situation, certainly that I've encountered in terms of people needing support or needing to adapt to the climate crisis. And most importantly, as he's pointed out today, it can ensure that climate finance gets to the poorest and most vulnerable and most marginalized, which is one of the big issues facing the world today. So thank you very much, Anwar, for that, and thank you for this opportunity to add a broader voice. Islamic Relief has been, since its founding, has been involved with 40 years now. We're celebrating our 40th anniversary this year. Islamic Relief's work has been involved with communities affected by climate breakdown. Since at least 2007, we've been explicitly contributing to efforts to address the worst impacts of climate change and also efforts to limit global heating to the target of 1.5 degrees. Islamic Relief have recognised the escalating risks caused by climate breakdown, and we've sought remedies in campaigning and advocacy alongside the practical work that we're doing. We've tracked that practical work with communities, work with communities to adapt to the climate emergency since 2017. Our latest publication, Adapting for the Future, shows us that our response is extended now to 23 countries globally and a combined budget of nearly $200 million. So we're doing substantial work, and I'll put into the chat. It'll probably take me a bit of a hesitation to do that because I'm notoriously unable to multitask, but I'll put the link into the chat for Adapting the Future, which hasn't worked because it won't take a link. I'll have to find that for you. But I do commend the document to everybody to have a look at what Islamic Relief has been doing. Indeed, what Islamic Relief has been doing with some of the learning from Bangladesh, because the model that Anwar has been describing is one that's been taken up by other countries, often not explicitly on climate adaptation issues, but on poverty reduction issues, and the processes of unconditional loans. Well, they're not loans, unconditional grants to community members, but with the help of setting up self-help groups and also having some inputs around building the capacity of people, mainly women, to understand the notions around wash and sanitation and health, for instance, in difficult circumstances, accessing education, basic literacy and numeracy, some of which in order to affect the establishment of self-help groups, funding loans whereby individual members will put in money to be utilised by members on a loan basis within the self-help group. This model has been exported across the world, and I think you'll see in Adapting to the Future how that has been utilised in order to deal with climate adaptation challenges. We believe from our experience that locally led adaptation can bring together people's spontaneous adaptation efforts to become more effective. Everybody faced with climate emergencies and climate breakdown has to adapt, and they are adapting. They're doing it on an individual basis. I think it's called autonomous adaptation. And the idea that locally led adaptation can bring together, autonomous adaptation can bring together the learning that people have, the knowledge that people have of their own particular situation, and get the sort of economies of scale and strengthen the community's capacity to deal with further changes as the climate crisis deepens, because of course this is a challenge to people which is going to get more over the years. It's not an emergency response where you foresee a return back to the situation previously with climate. we can only expect the challenges, the vulnerabilities to increase as the climate situation worsens, and we have to prepare for that. Similarly, we believe that climate justice, and very important to us as a Muslim organisation, justice and equity, it demands that the most impacted in the climate crisis, yet those least responsible for causing it, are resourced and respected and empowered to lead their own adaptation responses. But of course, this needs funding. So the topic of this session is climate finance. The current global climate finance system remains top-down, it's donor-driven, and it's disproportionately inaccessible to local actors. So I think Anwar gave in his slide what Islamic Relief are demanding of international climate finance, and I think I couldn't do better than the description that he made, and I'd really like to listen to him talk on that again. But I think we're calling for globally, we're calling for at least 70% of adaptation finance to reach the local level, in line with global targets and the principles for locally led adaptation, which of course ICCCAD and Gobeshona has been promoting since they were introduced in 2021. We're looking for unrestricted multi-year funding mechanisms that enable the flexibility and innovation that's absolutely vital to respond to local needs and local situations. It's no good setting the parameters of climate action in some office or at some central place when the situation that people find themselves in is so diverse. We need funding and support for strengthening of local institutions and community-based organisations through capacity building, through partnership, but not through paternalism. Islamic Relief is very aware that we are a big international organisation and that somehow our activities can reflect sort of colonial priorities. Here I am sitting in Birmingham, the very centre of the British Empire of old. We've got to be very careful that our ideas about local institutions aren't just a replication of those old colonial systems, or indeed replication of our own systems done at a local level, because they have to be responsive to the unique local conditions. We call for the full participation and leadership of local actors in funding decisions, in design, in monitoring and learning around adaptation action. There is a big difference between participation and learning and leadership. I think as international organisations have become very good in consulting communities and calling that the participation side of the work we're doing. I don't think we've been so good at ensuring that the leadership of interventions, of projects is local. And that's something that we've called for. And from Islamic Relief's point of view, we really feel that faith-based as well as indigenous knowledge systems should be recognised, and they need to be respected as valued and essential to adaptation success. I think the indigenous knowledge area has been one that's well rehearsed in international forums, faith-based less so, but I think is equally important to be able to tap into all the knowledge that's available, including that which is derived from religious bases. So that's finance, but Islamic Relief are really concerned directly with the quality of adaptations and ways of measuring those actions, measuring the effectiveness of those actions. So we're calling for an increase in the amount of adaptation funding. One of the things I didn't mention was this idea of balanced funding between adaptation and mitigation in the international forums. The Paris Agreement, the International Paris Agreement, says that funding should be balanced, and at the moment it's nothing like balanced. Adaptation getting a far smaller proportion of the whole. But the most important thing is the whole. There's been a decision that climate funding should reach $1.3 trillion by 2035, and that's sealed into agreement that was made in Baku last year. The mechanisms for doing that have not been decided, and that's some of the struggles that are going to continue. But it must be absolutely clear that adaptation, as Anwar was saying, adaptation has to be given its rightful place as a balanced part of the global action on climate. So back to the quality of adaptation. The international community, in the form of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, the organization that runs the COP meetings every year, is currently struggling to find global indicators for adaptation. And well, it might struggle. Reducing greenhouse gas emissions to mitigate global heating is a global goal, and actions can be readily added together. An action in Bangladesh could be added to an action in Mali, that could be added to an action in Canada, and all those numbers can be put together. They can be, as they say, aggregated. Adaptation, though, is invariably local, and targets and indicators for reducing vulnerability and increasing resilience should be derived locally as well. It makes sense. And it's hard to see how such a diverse set of actions can be readily aggregated. The United Nations is what it says. It's the United Nations. It wants indicators for goals that can be put together, united for a world global view on progress on adaptation. But I think it's going to find a great deal of difficulty in doing that. And certainly it's not going to be as straightforward as it is for reducing carbon emissions, for instance, in terms of mitigating the climate crisis. So Islamic Relief has been working alongside the Climate Action Network, other NGOs, to advise countries that community-based, locally led adaptation demands recognition under the global goal for adaptation. Progress towards its targets, the global goal for adaptation's targets to reduce the effect of climate change on various sectors, water, food, livelihoods, for instance, must be indicated by the degree to which resources and planning and action and assessments have been managed by the people affected. At the same time, internally, that's a message we're giving internationally and globally in international negotiations. But internally, we're developing metrics to assess the effectiveness of locally led adaptation initiatives to reduce vulnerability, to build resilience and enhance adaptive capacity. That's a trio that makes up the global goal, but of course that's immediately applicable to any scale. We can look at ways of reducing vulnerability, building resilience, enhancing adaptive capacity at the individual level, let alone the family level, the household level, the village level. We can at every scale that particular three goals can be applied. So our effectiveness metrics will involve indicators under each of those goals, and there will be others dealing with the adaptation cycle. The adaptation cycle is what those of us in the development business know as the project cycle. So it's planning, implementation, evaluation. That's essentially the adaptation cycle. So we're going to have indicators for the three elements: reducing vulnerability, building resilience, and enhancing adaptive capacity. And then for the adaptation cycle, for the project cycle. So for instance, for vulnerability, and these haven't been decided, and haven't been set out, but vulnerability, the sort of things that we might be looking for are the number of households with diverse income sources. Obviously, the more of those that there are, the more diverse income sources, the lessen the vulnerability, because weather events might affect one income generating activity while at the same time not another. And so the more diversity that within a household, the better. A reduction in displacement or migration due to climate impacts, and improvement in food security and nutrition levels. All of these can be measured in order to test the effectiveness of an adaptation intervention. In terms of vulnerability, reducing vulnerability, for increasing resilience, we might look at community access to and use of early warning systems, the functionality and durability of climate-resistant infrastructure. And reflecting on what Anwar was talking about, and such an important part of the model that he was describing, social cohesion and social networks might be measured. Mutual aid community groups, for instance, the self-help groups that were being described, but also in other countries in Islamic Relief's roster, it might be village saving and loans associations. Very similar sort of approach there. And then for enhancing capacity, adaptive capacity, the inclusion of local knowledge in adaptation strategies, the institutional support for adaptation planning at a local level, local access to adaptation finance and resources, a very important one-on-one we're talking about today. Those might be indicators of the effectiveness of local adaptation initiatives. And from the cross-cutting point of view, inclusion of marginalised groups in decision-making would definitely be one of them. Perceived effectiveness of adaptation efforts by local stakeholders, which I think is a very important one, because that's where we would use the idea of participatory impact monitoring and evaluation, whereby the people involved, and we talk, say, local stakeholders in this, but it's the people who are affected, the people who are leading the efforts, would be the ones to decide what success would look like and be able to set up indicators locally about whether or not they're being achieved. And of course, the proportion of the budget, which is controlled by local actors. So there we have an outline of an effectiveness, a measure of effectiveness of locally led adaptation action. And with these, I think the flexibility to include locally derived indicators from local leadership and climate vulnerability and capacity analysis, which is something that Islamic Relief has been working on intensively over the last 2 years. We're looking to have a humanitarian community climate vulnerability and capacity analysis as part of a sort of a rapid and needs analysis in crisis situations. And we're developing that, and that's being piloted at the moment, and it's going to be added to most Islamic Relief countries over the next year, and then made something that's available to all agencies. So we need local leadership. We need the locally derived indicators in the climate vulnerability, and that will derive from the climate vulnerability capacity analysis, because of course that will be different for every community. Every community has unique vulnerabilities. Every community has unique capacities. With these, Islamic Relief seeks now to improve the quality and accountability of its interventions in effective adaptation. We're nowhere near success at that. A long way to go, I think. When colleagues have a look at adapting for the future, you'll see that a lot of our work isn't genuinely locally led. We certainly reach the sort of basic criteria of consultation and participation in a lot of cases, but we have a long way to go, as indeed has the world a long way to go in order to facilitate locally led adaptation as being the main factor in adaptation action. But I think we have a great deal to contribute, and I think that the model that Anwar set out is the one that's going to see us, is one that could see benefit throughout the world through all organizations and governments. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jenny, for your extensive discussion on how Islamic Relief is working on adaptation planning and the future scope. So now we would like to invite Talha Jamal, Country Director, Islamic Relief Bangladesh. He will discuss on the scope and challenges of adopting climate financing model of Islamic Relief Bangladesh.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu to everyone. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers for providing Islamic Relief a space to present this climate adaptation project, which we have pioneered in providing a perspective of a community-led, interest-free financing model for climate adaptation. So thank you very much for providing this space to us. It is actually not just about funding. It is about dignity, about resilience, and about shifting real power to the communities, is which we are talking about. And thank you very much, Anwar Bhai, for a very detailed and a nice presentation, and to Jamie for a very comprehensive covering all aspects on this subject from the Islamic Relief worldwide perspective. Though what I'll be speaking, so many of it will be a reiteration since quite a lot of things have been covered, but still I would like to put forward few points. Firstly, about what Anwar Bhai has been talking about is building community finance using the modality of SHGs, self-help groups. Self-help group is not a new concept. It has been in use for quite some time in many of our development projects. But over here, this self-help group concept has been particularly used from the context of climate change adaptation and resilience building. Under the project, like in a span of 1.5 to 2 years, about 150 self-help groups were formed involving 3,700 families. And this is quite a substantial social capital created in such a small time. And what is more interesting is that the weekly savings which the community members have done with very small amounts which they can really afford to contribute, which was around 10 to 50 Bangladeshi takas per member. They have been able to mobilize a substantial capital at the community level, which is about 45,000 British pound in a very small time. The money which has been mobilized, this act as an emergency fund, to meet the emergency need of the community. And from what we have seen from our surveys in the project, we have found that primarily they are used in meeting medical emergencies, protecting livelihoods, shelter repair during the climate shocks. Similarly, the other fund which has been created is this community, adaptation fund, which is another interesting part. So beyond emergencies, members have saved from their, from their earnings, which they do. They are contributing small amount to this particular adaptation fund, and under which they have mobilized about 75,000 British pound. And from these funds which have been created, the emergency fund or adaptation fund, the members are actually getting interest-free loan to meet their adaptation needs, their emergency needs, even their business needs. So it is quite flexible in terms of meeting varied kind of needs. And from the example, like from the community, we have got several examples where a very vulnerable community, they have used it. For example, they have used it in terms of raising the cowshed to protect it from waterlogging. Then similarly, we have seen women who have used access this fund to build latrines, which is so much convenient for them, especially during the monsoon season. And the beauty of this community level funds is the quick access to it. They are able to access to it quickly, easily, and they are getting the money for immediate action on resolving their needs, which helps them to mitigate the risk, and through adaptation or by taking various other action. Excuse me. Uh, So easy and quick access is one of the key things which helps in this and help them in timely action. And another aspect of this project is that all these self-help groups, they are also federated in a body which is called the Apex body, and that body is registered as a cooperative and works under that framework. And these apex bodies, they have actually mobilized about 17,000 British pound by now. Like they are still evolving and they are conducting various social businesses. And then they have also created a fund which is called Takaful Fund, which is Islamic Micro Insurance. And this is another very interesting initiative under which they have mobilized about 7,000 British pound, and that is already helping families who have faced death or chronic illness or in-house damages and all. So these innovations actually show that how financial resilience and social safety net can be community-led, sustainable, equity-driven, and also inclusive. Some of the I will also like to a bit emphasize on how this model grounds climate finance, and some key key terms which has already been discussed by Anwar Bhai. First thing is decentralization or localization. The finance actually reaches the most vulnerable directly, and that really reduces inequality, as well as it is very, very inclusive. The best part of it, like whenever I have been on a field visit, what I have, while talking to the members of the self-help group, most of them have unanimously said this, cutting across caste, religion, ethnicity. They have really welcomed these interest-free instrument as being very liberating, and like it really helps them a lot in addressing their issues, and then also in returning back the money back to the pool. And another thing is women empowerment. Most of these groups are women-led, and they are the decision makers, and that really reduces the dependency and also challenges the traditional norms. And helps people, to avoid getting into a debt trap because of this interest-free loaning. This has really prevented them from getting, helped them to reduce, the chances of taking loans from on very high interests from local money lenders or other microfinance institutions. And another thing is that such project, then the project, the most marginalized are prioritized. The focus is on landless, on indigenous, on people, on Dalits, on ultra-poor families who have largely, benefited from this project. And the other part is that it respects the indigenous knowledge and the solutions which are coming out. They are rooted in ground realities, on the local realities, and the solutions are low-cost solutions, and that is very much in control of the local people, and hence it is, it is sustainable, and it is replicable, and it is also scalable. So this is the very important part. And also, the shifting of power, how this model is like reduces donor-driven dependency and promotes true community ownership. So these are, some of the important things which I wanted to, re-emphasize. And some of the advocacy points have already been mentioned in detail by Anwar Bhai as well as by Jamie. The only point which I would like to emphasize here is that I would really urge, the donors, the governments, and the practitioners to invest directly in community-driven mechanism, because this has really proven to be impactful and transformative. The model, clearly shows, that how investing at community level can give transformational impact in meeting climate change adaptation and objective. And there is a need to, enhance, because as I saw in the presentation that only 10% of the funding reaches down to the community level. That has to really go up substantially, because that will have a major impact in empowering people to solve their own problems, and we should respect the indigenous knowledge, and they have all the capacities to really solve their problems if they are very well supported. So thank you very much, all of you.
Thank you, Brother Talha, for your valuable insights. Thank you to all our speakers on this topic of locally led adaptation. Today, we have actually learned so much about, from the presentations, about the gender dynamics, the gender gaps, and how women are facing the issues of climate change. We have learned the gaps in the funding. We need more funding about this adaptation and climate. So it appears that it is a holistic model that Islamic Relief is proposing to other countries as well. So thanks to all our speakers for sharing their valuable insights about this model. Now at this point, we have completed all our presentations. We can move to the question answer session. So if there is any question that needs to answer, we can check on that. In the chat box or in the question answer box, there is no questions found from participant side. So if there is anything we want to discuss further, we can do it, or otherwise I would like to conclude the session. So there is no questions from anyone, I guess. So thank you, the participants, for joining the session and learning about Islamic Relief's model on climate and locally led adaptation. Thank you, honorable speakers, to talk about this topic. So here we conclude the session for today. Thank you.
Thank you, Romana. Thank you, everybody. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you, everybody. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks a lot. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.